Alrighty, so welcome everybody to the Roku SceneGraph panel. To start the session off, I'd like to go over some of the items that we'll be covering. At the top of the list, it's going to be the 11.5 firmware rollout and the features included in it. Again, as you probably heard, 11.5 is our latest OS that's being deployed. We'll be covering some topics pertaining to changes within the OS itself, some tooling mechanism changes, and more direct changes to the media functionality within the OS, followed by reporting and analytics, a little blurb about Roku Pay, and no SceneGraph panel would be complete without ending up with some best practices. All right, starting off with 11.5 features. A couple of new things have been added to the OS. At the top of the list, we have some new ECP commands, which were previously mentioned by Jeff Dunn. There is the R2D2 bitmaps ECP command, which returns, it's an enhancement to an already existing command, which returns the texture memory used by the channel. And with the additional enhancement, it includes some textures that could have been previously missed in previous OSs. Some of you who have used this feature in the past might have noticed that the memory allocation, the texture memory that is being reported previously, was slightly off between what was truly used by the channel. So the enhancements that have been made here are intended to address that and more accurately display what the channel is using in terms of texture memory, followed by SG nodes rendezvous. This is actually a pretty cool feature, which provides a counter of how many rendezvous that the channel has initiated. So this is very good for tracking overall metrics and performance of the channel. Generally, you want to keep your rendezvous count low, which ensures proper channel flow, snappiness, and performance. SG nodes all, again, that was another command that Jeff had mentioned. This actually reports all of the SG nodes that the channel is using. It's a useful metric for gathering various metrics on your channel, specifically around any orphan nodes, memory utilization, and such. And ending it off with the registry, this is a command that allows you to essentially dump the contents of the registry of your channel. So this can be very useful for determining what is stored in registry, what has been overridden, if it has been overridden correctly, another useful debug feature. The BrightScript debug protocol has been updated to what we call version 3.1. So it includes additional support for compile errors and conditional breakpoints, which can be leveraged by various third-party tools. And BrightScript itself has actually been updated to include the continue keyword, which you can use within various for and while loop functions. The array grid component has been updated with the ability to disable focus animations. This is essentially there to include feature parity between markup grid and markup list, which already includes this functionality. And last but not least is a change to the application packager, the tool that generates the PKGs. It's been updated to generate the PKGs in a SquashFS with Z standard compression. The rationale behind that is better compression for various flash constraint devices. Next on the list, we have a couple of SDK1 legacy features which have been deprecated, and most of these are older pre-SceneGraph UI screen components, which are no longer supported. This has actually been communicated previously, I believe, through the various blog posts over the years. And finally, in 11.5, these components have been removed. Tyler and Sugarland have additionally been sunset. They will remain on 11.0 and will not get an update to 11.5. And enable fresh connection, which is underlying functionality within the curl library, which would force curl to essentially create a new session with a particular endpoint has been disabled. So this API is actually a no-op at the moment. And existing connections will default to curl's standard algorithm of how it selects which session to reuse. And here's a list of the older legacy SDK1 components that are now deprecated as of 11.5. Majority of these would not be compatible with RSG channels, so it's highly unlikely that any of these components are actually used in conjunction with RSG channels. Moving on to the features, this tool, the Roku Resource Monitor, is something new that has been rolled out in 11.5. It has been slightly covered in the previous conversations, so this is probably your second, if not third time hearing about it. But it kind of rounds out our suite of developer tools to help visually represent the state of the channel at runtime. So using the resource monitor, you're able to track and visualize memory utilization, CPU, and node count within the channel. So it's a really powerful tool that you can use in conjunction with the BrightScript profiler to really help fine-tune your channel and identify any memory leaks or contributing aspects of code that might be causing performance issues within your channel. Now moving on to the media section, a couple of new UI elements have been introduced. One is the secondary title, which is very similar to the subtitle option that's been given. So you can specify a title and, as the name suggests, a secondary title. The playback action buttons is possibly a little bit more of an exciting feature. And here's a screenshot of what you can expect it to look like. What's essentially, it allows you to provide your own custom buttons on top of the playback UI overlay. And in this case, you can see it's the caption and audio track, the back, and the next button. And last is the pivot node, which it's somewhat unusually named, and it's not necessarily too descriptive of what it does. So we've included a little animation to show you what the pivot node is. As you can see here, that second row, the first and second row that pops up, that is the pivot node in play. So it allows you to add additional overlays of content or anything that you might want to add on top of the video. And coincidentally, you also see the title and subtitle in there as well. Moving on to the reporting section, this is something that's facilitated outside the Roku OS, and it's actually available through the developer portal. Likely many of you have used this, but it's an ever-evolving piece of the development landscape at Roku. So the channel engagement section allows you to view the installs and visits and streaming hours for all of your channels. Channel health, it's likely something that a lot of you use very heavily. It's a tool that will let you gather various BrightScript crash metrics along with any buffering data pertaining to your channels. Audience insights is a demographic breakdown of the install base of your channel, followed by viewership summary, which displays various health metrics for your channel, not covered under the channel health section. Video statistics contains data for direct publishers. That's not directly applicable here. And rounding off the rest of the items are transactions, sales activity, and payouts report, all pertaining to Roku Pay. If you haven't looked at these sections, I highly recommend that you take a look at them in the developer dashboard. And again, if there's anything that you would like to see that you're not seeing here, definitely please voice that. This is something I'd very much like to hear. Roku Pay, a new feature that's been introduced in 11.5 is the passive subscription on hold, which allows subscriptions to be placed on hold if the method of payment fails. This has been briefly covered in the previous aspects of the presentation and definitely delved in depth in the Roku Pay breakout session. Essentially, the idea behind this is that a subscription will be placed on hold and will remain in that state until the method of payment can be charged. And the idea behind it is to really reduce churn and try to keep the customer for as long as possible. And the final section is best practices. This hasn't really changed too much from previous times, but the best practices for your channels is to definitely leverage the new tools that we've introduced, from the BrightScript profiler to the resource monitor, and to really keep track of various nodes that your channel is creating. Make sure you reference, keep track of any hanging references that you might need to address memory leaks.
All right, here's a question that came from our voice panel. We directed them here from Andrew. Will there be some kind of Roku emulator that runs Roku OS and Roku apps directly on a PC in the near future?
So, Socket, is that something you'd like to take?
Yeah, at this point of time, actually, it's like we are not revealing the future roadmap, but we will do it as it will come.
It's definitely a very hot ask, so we it does pique our ears.
Yeah.
I would just say that it's a developer summit tradition that question does get asked, and so we have the. Yeah,
it's true. It
is. It would not be a dev summit without it. So thank you.
We can see the 16 likes here. So.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. I would like to see a way to connect a Roku device to a proxy to easily monitor network traffic.
So I could probably touch on that one, and maybe Felix, you could chime in a bit as well. Historically, it's very difficult to work with proxies on Roku. There are certain things you can and can't do. For instance, any secure connection coming from the Roku, you won't necessarily be able to proxy that successfully. It's overall challenging to set it up, as the system isn't designed to really allow for that. But you can leverage tools like Minim Proxy, Charles, and possibly Wireshark to proxy certain non-secure connections.
All right. Felix, did you have anything to add on, or?
I think in general, yeah, Ben pretty much covered it. Yeah, but I guess if you wanted to do through a get that secure traffic, you would have to get the SSL cert utilized within the channel that you're utilizing, and then also use it within the tool that, like, say, Minim Proxy or any other third-party tool to decrypt that traffic.
Yeah, and that's usually the showstopper. Most developers won't have access to those secure proxies, depending on what server you're talking to, and if you own it, if you have access to those certs. So in most cases, if you're trying to debug something that requires a secure connection, it's might not be possible, at least through a proxy.
Hey, George, BrightScript profiler rarely works for me. Any advice? Also, I would say that's George, this may be a case where we may want to use the raise hand feature, because I think this one where this sounds like a very general statement. It'd be good to pinpoint specifically what's not working.
Yeah, I think we'd need a little bit more of a live discussion for that one.
So, okay, so George has raised his hand. So it's give me 1 second here to pull that up. Get the chat up here. Sorry, just having. Give me 1 second here. So yeah, just my the chat on the Zoom is not popping up right now. So I'm having just give me 1 second, guys, and we'll. Unless I hit it somewhere. So here, let's move on to the next question while I try to figure this out.
Okay.
How many nodes is too many? If we use them for date, for example, no texture memory controls attached.
Wow, George is on fire here. So that it's a very subjective question because it depends what kind of nodes you're using and how and where they're being used. And then it's further compounded by what device you're trying to use that many nodes on. So what I mean by that is some of the older devices, let's say we take Tyler and Sugarland, which we mentioned previously during the presentation, those are relatively low memory devices compared to something like a Cooper or a Benjamin, for instance. So it has to be very specific for the particular platform that you're using, and also the time and place that you're trying to use those nodes. So for what I mean by that is, let's say you're playing content and you have video on the screen. You probably want to be conscious of your memory usage and what's happening as the CPU is busy playing video. So trying to render too much stuff on top of it could potentially cause performance issues, which is likely what you would see on a Tyler, but maybe not necessarily so on a more higher end device.
And I probably would add as well, that's probably more often than not. Yeah, it would be more memory usage in general. And especially, I guess this would be a nice plugin for the resource monitor as well.
Mm-hmm.
You monitor the amount of memory being utilized by the channel. And that's essentially the reason why you probably would see, whether channels are crashing or, suboptimal performance on those certain devices. But yeah, it is also dependent on the device that you're running the channel on.
I think I'm unmuted, is that correct?
Oh, hey, George. We can hear you.
Yeah, so with the nodes thing, what if they were just data nodes, like not backed, so just a node with, for example, 6 strings in it, nothing else, no textures, no controls, nothing. Does that, is there a physical limit to the amount of nodes beyond memory usage, or so can we use them for data storage quite safely, assuming that we're not doing any processing, they're just there hanging around?
Well, content nodes are frequently used for that. I suppose it depends what kind of data storage you mean, but when you mentioned data storage, sort of content nodes came to mind. I know that is historically a good way of storing data and moving it around within the channel.
There's no limit on the number of nodes. Like, you're just constrained by the amount of memory in the system.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the
Exactly.
resource monitor point was just, I find oftentimes, even on a 4K Premiere device, I'll start an app with a channel with a resource monitor, and sometimes it just doesn't want to launch. I don't know if there's anything I'm doing wrong, but I remember it used to work, and obviously it slows down because it's monitoring everything, but sometimes it seems it just doesn't start.
I know that there's a way of starting the resource monitor with it being in a paused state, and it sort of waits for a command when you launch the channel. I'm not sure if that could be something that
Sorry, the profiler, the one that goes really deep and gives you the stack traces and the exact calls of functions and everything.
Yeah, the BrightScript profiler.
Right.
So use that in pause mode. Is that what I'm hearing?
George, actually, what would be good is, like, tomorrow we have a dedicated panel for developer tools, and Jeff Dunn's going to be there, who actually wrote the BrightScript profiler. I think there's gonna be a lot of time to do a deep dive on a question like that. So I think my ask to get you the right kind of help at the depth, I think can we ask that tomorrow?
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
And let's keep track of this question. If it's something that's not working, or if you've encountered an edge case where whatever your channel is set up with is causing this behavior, I'd definitely like to see that, and we should track it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Okay. Let's see. Have you thought about implementing an API for channel updates. A lot of developers will be very grateful for this feature.
Okay.
Well, yeah, we've thought about it, so it's definitely something we're discussing. But no, we don't have a set roadmap on it.
Okay. Now that the vast majority of the supported devices support OpenGL, why not improve the BrightScript Draw 2D to allow drawing polygons?
Well, that'd be a fabulous new feature.
We will make a note when we go through. We'll add this to our list of SceneGraph RFEs from the Dev Summit. Hey, Vince asks, will BrightScript be updated to parse large integers? For example, UTC timestamps in milliseconds.
I'm not sure if that's come up before. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, we have run into that on my team in the past. As like Kevin said, this would be another good feature, I think.
We will add it to the list. We use the create object RO channel store. Sorry, we use the get channel cred channel store function to retrieve the Roku PUC ID, the PUC ID. Sometimes this request takes up to 10 seconds. This is especially a problem when the user runs the app for the first time. Is there a way to speed it up, or maybe you can move this identifier to another interface?
I think there's something else going on here. If you're consistently seeing this take 10 seconds, I'd very much like to see this in an example or something that we take a look at, because I don't think a 10-second round trip on a consistent basis is reasonable.
Yeah, so this one, Paul, if you can either through the developer Slack channel, through your partner manager, or through partner success request, if you could provide more information on this, and then we could actually help you investigate, figure out what's going on with root causes. Okay, from Arturo. Why are anonymous functions stripped from node fields? I've always heard from other people that is the case, but what's the technical reasoning behind this decision? The field may be stumped on this one, so we're gonna move on.
Let's make a note of it. We'll take a look.
We have been told that content nodes have some very special optimizations around the fields they have and their values. Could you clarify why and what type of optimizations exist for content nodes that we know we are using them the correct way?
I think for the most part, this goes back to like the original legacy SDK and the content metadata fields that were sort of predefined for that SDK, and they were carried over as like the default set for content nodes. But you can add your own fields to a content node as well. So I don't think it's sort of a strict limitation these days.
Okay. Oh, hold on, and then actually let's. I think we've got Chris and George have follow-up questions. So let me go to Chris. Christopher Dwyer Perkins, to be clear, since we have multiple Chris's. Chris, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify a little bit, because there's been some talk in Slack with some Roku engineers that there's basically some magic behind the field of content node metadata. And we're looking at clarification, because there was some talks about being able to access those values by reference instead of by copy, like a typical node has as a field limitation, some things like that. So I was wondering if you'd be able to talk into that a little bit more in depth specifically.
Maybe you're referring to our Earl Fetcher data model sample app. That was really a sample app we put together a couple years ago to avoid having a lot of rendezvous, right? So the idea being that you're going to definitely have a rendezvous if in your data task thread you access, m.top or m.global. So typically you want to avoid doing that until you've finished a job. So if you think of your data task thread as kind of a worker thread that maybe spins off an URL fetcher and then does a parse JSON on some return values, and then gets a bunch of content nodes, basically. Well, it'll get back after parse JSON, it'll be an associative array, and then you can do like a SceneGraph node update to put all those nodes in a list and then assign it to an m.top value for one rendezvous back for that entire list. So that's kind of the gist of the data model. And nodes are passed by reference from like a data task to the render thread, whereas associative arrays are passed by copy. So I think that's maybe what you're referring to in pass by reference.
Kind of. There was some things alluded to that the actual fields defined under the content node metadata structure had special under the hood optimizations that the typical fields on other nodes don't benefit from. It wasn't rendezvous specifically. But if they are not treated differently, then that clarifies and removes. Basically, some of us were planning to abuse it. Let's be honest. We abuse things all the time. So, but if they're not treated any differently, if they're treated like any other field, including one that you add on your own, then I guess the real benefit is only that a content node is buildable on a task thread, unlike other renderable nodes where they become immediately owned by the render thread. That's the only real difference there, then, I guess, correct?
That's correct. I mean, there are special name fields like Chris alluded to in content metadata, but they're not treated differently as far as like the SceneGraph architecture goes. They're more specially named fields that have special functionality in our media player, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So have any ECP commands been removed? I noticed that I can no longer use query apps.
Saket, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, query apps is not being used because we didn't see much utility. I'm not sure what is the use case for this one. Initially, it was there, but yeah, of it we have removed it. I don't know which version we removed it. Probably 11.0 itself.
Yeah, we removed all the ECP apps, apps and launch commands, just to ensure that third-party apps such as mobile apps were not using ECP commands to sort of manage channels. So that was we had to tighten that up a little bit.
Yeah, just to further with that one is that local host is not allowed. Means any ECP command using the local host. It's already documented, and we will be disabling it in 12.0. So all those local host loopback address will be disabled.
Okay. Have you thought about implementing APIs for Roku transaction payout reporting? This would have been a great question for the Roku Pay team, but what we can do, we can take that to them actually. And so I will let the Roku Pay team address this one, but we'll make a note of it and ask them. And then the next question I get to answer. Are there any plans on improving the documentation, fixing irregularities, mistakes, better code examples, and linking between pages? We're always looking to make the documentation better. If you notice something that's incorrect, if there is a bad link, or you have a recommendation of whether samples we need to improve, feel free to put that in the developer Slack channel. I'm in there all the time. People regularly do point out mistakes, and I typically try to correct those as soon as possible. So yeah, if you find anything you want improved specifically, any mistakes, just put it in the Slack channel. We're always looking to make whatever it takes to make developing channels easier and faster, and whatever documentation we can create, or whether it's a document, a video, presentation, whatever it takes, then that's the most important thing to us. So feel free to please give us the feedback, and we are very responsive to that.
Yeah, I second that. I'd definitely like to hear on what samples you need that are missing, and we can see where we can get those out there.
Absolutely. Is there a simple way to create a rounded rectangle? We currently create a background 9-patch image for rounded rectangles.
That's the right way to do it.
Yeah, there is no alternate way of doing that.
All right. What are the pros and cons of defining nodes in the XML versus adding programmatically in BrightScript?
Well, the big pro is it lets you change what's in them without necessarily updating your channel. If that data is being delivered by an API external to the channel, you can put whatever data you want in there without having to update your channel.
All right. Here's a fun one for our community tools folks. Do you recommend the use of BrightScript for the app or player-specific development? I think actually we make a point in our documentation right now talking about the use of IDEs or other tools. We do actually recommend using these community supported tools like BrightScript. And I will give you guys a plug for tomorrow. We actually have a dedicated panel session for the Roku community guys. So Chris Dwyer-Perkins and Brondley are going to be speaking. And so it's a first time thing we're doing. We're super excited. So yeah, we totally recommend them. They build great tools, they work, and they have high adoption in the community. So absolutely. All right. Will we ever get a WYSIWYG editor type system for SceneGraph?
Well, we do have the Roku Advanced Layout Editor, which we'll be covering tomorrow on the DevTools session. But beyond that, I mean, that's what we have today.
Okay. Could you improve the BrightScript language to use programming reserve words like switch case to avoid if-else sentences?
Yes. I will add it to the backlog.
I feel I may regret the fact that I could have said a semi-naughty word right on air. I'm proud of myself. Will if HTTP agent be updated include set username and password so that non-URL transfer objects can access protected addresses?
I'm not sure I quite understand the use case. Anyone else?
So I'm going to let Kevin allow Kevin to expand on his question. So Kevin, you do have the floor. You can unmute and go ahead.
Okay, so here's a use case I'm dealing with at the moment. I'm accessing pictures on a username and password protected site. I don't want to download the image through a URL transfer to the Roku file system, then display it that way, because that adds unnecessary delay in the whole system. So if I could simply set the username and password in the HTTP agent of the poster, that would, in theory, make it work.
I gotcha.
So yeah, we do support basic auth if that's what you're talking about. If it's just basic auth, that's supported today. You also have the ability to add any headers that you want to the requests. So if you're doing auth outside of the initial request and you get a token back and you need a session token to the images, you can add that as a header.
The one I'm dealing with is a digest auth, which you can do on an URL transfer, but I don't seem to be able to do that on a poster. Unless I'm doing something wrong.
Oh, well, no, yes, you can do it on posters as well. The way you do it is all of our objects like that in SceneGraph, they have an HTTP agent. So you can just use the HTTP agent for that particular element that you're downloading for.
But it doesn't, according to the docs, it doesn't list a set username and password for HTTP agent, only for the URL transfer.
Oh, okay.
So that's the
Yes. That's the issue. Understood.
Yep.
So there you go. So if you just post that in the developer Slack channel, it's a doc error. We can take a look then and get that fixed.
So if
Yeah.
it's just a doc error, okay, I'll give it a shot.
Well, I don't think it's a doc
Oh.
error. I think that's probably true that we probably didn't plumb through HTTP agent for that. They both use curl underneath, but I think probably we didn't plumb that through to the interface.
Mhm.
All right. Let's see here. So Christopher Dwyer Perkins, you have a follow-up question. So let me go ahead, Chris. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that a little bit. While it is documented that we have HTTP agent on pretty much all nodes, it does not work on everything. An example of this is trying to add headers to a component library component via the HTTP agent will not go over, among many other things. And this has been very problematic for quite a few different use cases, not just this digest auth issue.
Yeah, well, it sounds like maybe you're finding some bugs. I'm not sure if we have a good way for you to report those things to us, but we probably should. I don't know, Jonathan, maybe you can take a note of how we gather that info.
Sure. We'll make a note. Okay. All right. Vince asks, any plans to extend support to build BrightScript projects in a remote environment, such as GitLab, continuous integration, continuous development for code validation, and to catch bugs, errors early in the development cycle without manually running the app on a Roku device? Sounds like a sort of a Saket question, perhaps.
Yeah, currently we're not thinking of it, but we can think about it, whether that can help in a development in the future.
And then I've got Broadley. I'm going to allow Broadley Plum to take the floor and ask a question. Broadley?
Thanks, Jonathan. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Great. So this is a shameless plug, but we have a project called BrightScript, which supports both BrightScript and some additional syntaxes if you wanted to use. It's kind of like TypeScript for Roku development. But the BrightScript project will parse your plain BrightScript projects, and it runs on Node.js. So we use this internally at some of our projects. So yeah, you can just npm install BrightScript and then run it against your project. And what it does is it validates your project. It validates every scope. It checks for syntax errors, compile errors, those types of things. It's not like officially Roku supported. It's it's a community tool. And so obviously there may be compile errors that we're not checking for, but it's fairly robust. So yeah, you can check that out. It's on GitHub. It's called BrightScript.
And you guys should definitely check out tomorrow's Roku community panel if you want more information about BrightScript. So please come back. That'll actually close out our whole developer summit tomorrow. So please come back. All right. Next question from Brian. Did I understand that you won't be able to hit the localhost in 12.0 firmware? I've used that to get around the issue of the video player not allowing a path from the temp directory.
Yeah, so this is correct. Like we are going to disable the local host, and I think this is already documented for a couple of years that it is not allowed. And I'm not sure like the use case, like here, video player not allowing the path from temp. Yeah, I'm not sure this use case. Chris, anybody can elaborate on this use case?
No, I mean, playing a video from temp seems like something that would very rarely happen.
So let Brian expand on. Let me see if I can do this. Give me 1 second. Okay. Brian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so to be clear, yeah, it's definitely not playing the file from temp. Basically, the idea is you're going to download the manifest and either, obviously Roku's gotten better of giving more access to more fields. So it's less, it used to be a lot of times it was like you were just trying to get a field from the manifest or like that. But there are still times, let's say, where you need to change like a piece of the manifest before it gets played. And the workaround for that was basically running a local server on the Roku, basically like an HTTP server. So it's like feeding it to itself to work around the issue that you can't play from temp. To get around that, it would be great if temp could be fixed as part of with 12.0. That's just kind of been like the workaround for that. Already, like for example, RAF lets you take in a temp path for the VAS file. So it seems like it would make sense for the video player to also be able to take in the temp path as well.
So that's actually a very interesting approach. The only cases where I've seen temp used was, for instance, if you're trying to play a static MP4, for instance, rather than trying to reference like a HLS or dash manifest. I actually didn't think that would work at all. So I'm surprised to hear that it's worked, that you've been able to specify a localhost URL and the player accepted that at any point. But that's interesting.
And just to be clear, I think when I mentioned about the localhost, it was mainly in context of ECP commands.
Okay, and that was one question I was wondering is it limited to just the 8060 port, or is it just overall just 127.0.0.1 just wouldn't work?
So my reference was mainly to the 8060.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. See. All right. From Brian Smith. Can the QR code generation routines used by Roku Pay and others in the firmware be exposed to us to access the local device with our own channels?
I'm sure they could. Well, we can't comment on the roadmap, and this is a new idea to me, but it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like this would be a new feature of sorts.
I'm going to allow Brian, do you want to expand on that? You can unmute yourself and. Brian, go ahead. The floor is yours. Okay, we're going to move on.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Brian, can you raise your hand again? I'm sorry. Brian, you can go ahead. Let's do this again. Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry about that. Just for like a service where the user has to link to a server there for access to the app, rather than them having to type in the entire URL. If it's possible to just like grab a code there for it and then show it locally, then we wouldn't have to like hit our server here for the graphic for it. That's about it, you know.
And what's the full use case? Why does the user need to go off device?
Because if they already had an account at a different like location, and they didn't want to have to put in their username and password there for it,
Gotcha.
then using the backend on Roku here to pull up the login, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they could just hit the code here with the phone instead of
Gotcha. In that use case, I know our requirements are actually keep the user on the platform. So what I would recommend in that case, if typing the username and password is problematic, is to leverage the voice keyboard to make it a little bit quicker, rather than driving the user off device.
We do that already, but this would be like faster for us since the codes are in Roku Pay already, you know. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next question. Is there a reliable way from Arturo? Is there a reliable way to release texture memory? I noticed that if I have a group with posters inside, removing the group does not decrease the texture memory usage from the resource monitor point of view.
Yeah, I'll take that question. So there is a right way of removing the texture memory. It's not going down because it works on the LRU mechanism. So whenever there is a memory pressure, it will remove the last node automatically from the texture. So current way, whatever you are doing is the right way to do it.
Okay. You had mentioned that we should keep track of nodes created to avoid memory leaks. Is there a way to delete nodes when they're no longer needed? Should you set any variables referring to those nodes to invalid?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. If the reference count goes to 0, the node is destroyed.
That's correct.
Right. As the user navigates between screens, components from a screen are thrown away and recreated on a different screen. What are the pros, cons of reconstructing components over and over versus attaching some components at a global level? How expensive in resources is spinning up new object instances?
Well, it's not as expensive as redrawing underlying screens. So it'd be good to actually hide things. Make sure you're hiding things as you're not using them and rendering them. And
to piggyback on that, a frequent issue that Felix and I have come across relatively frequently is something as basic as like a loading or a busy spinner. Developers frequently will hide those, but it still animates or somehow still accessible in the background, which does put some CPU overhead. So as you hide elements, you definitely want to be careful if they're hidden and just not active.
Okay. Is it correct that Roku OS 12.0 will disable ECP? We use ECP on Android application for Roku Remote.
No, so 12.0, we will disable the ECP command to run on the local host only from the remote for all automation purpose. Whatever you guys are doing, that will still be working.
All right, we have a follow-up here on the whole XML nodes versus programmatic. Does one approach of using XML nodes versus programmatically adding them in BrightScript implement variable private public access better than the other? And things in the XML get initialized and they get initialized again in the init function of the parent node.
I don't think so. At least to number one, I would say no, there's no real difference. And then number two, it kind of goes to a couple of things we talked about earlier, where it's sort of a balancing act of, what do you want to hold around in memory and what do you want to destroy? And that's just something you kind of have to figure out. You can use, the various profiling tools to know when and how much data to hold around in memory. If you're going to be using it again right away, you can probably just hold it around as opposed to building a whole another tree later. But yeah, I think both of those are just kind of trial and error things for your particular channel.
Well, and they should be equivalent, really.
Right.
Whether you've defined it in XML or you programmatically created the node.
Right. Sure. The resulting structure would be the
Should-
same. Yeah.
Okay. Stephen Keen asks, is there a reason Mass Group doesn't support 9-patch images? The documentation explicitly states that it doesn't. So it doesn't sound like that was an oversight.
I think that's something we might have to take back to take a closer look.
Okay. George asks, I noted I can install a package on a rekeyed device a few weeks ago via the sideload zip upload feature, despite this not being documented. Not sure how I got it to work. It hasn't worked since. Will this be supported?
No, we're not. You're not supposed to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Here we go. Hey, there's a feature request from Arturo. Allow to export channel crashes as JSON data instead of CSV or the text documents we get from emails. This would allow to push them to external error tracking services like Sentry.
Sounds useful.
The get purchases function returns only subscriptions, no one-time purchases. Is that okay? That'd be a good question, by the way. Like, we could also direct that towards the Roku Pay team.
Yeah.
And it may, if you could ask that in either the Developer Summit, Roku Pay channel, or the Roku Developer, just regular channel, if you can ask that, but also just make sure, Dim, you provide a little more detail. That'd be great. We can get you the right kind of help on that.
Yeah, and try get all purchases. It may return those types as well. So get purchases is supposed to be only active subscriptions, and get all purchases should be
historical.
All your purchases, even inactive subscriptions. And I'm not sure if one-time purchases are included or not, but likely they are.
Okay, George asks, any advice on where to get old, rare devices? We get crashes on some devices that we can't get our hands on to test with. I will point out obviously you can check out your eBay, Craigslist, whatever you have, that secondhand marketplace to find your older devices. I don't know if you guys have any other suggestions, but that seems to be the obvious one.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Do nodes use more memory than an associative array or string representation? Wonder if it makes sense to only build nodes on demand if we get a big response from the server.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, if you're getting a big chunk of JSON from a server, I would only build the nodes that you need right then.
And only build them with the data that you need.
Right.
Like, you don't necessarily have to include everything in the JSON in your node, which we see sometimes. That's a lot of overhead.
Okay. So next question from Paul, or anonymous, actually. Sorry, I was going ahead by one. Is there any option to develop multiple channels by using same code with an API and where the API and image changes?
Sure. Yeah, that's pretty common actually, at least in the work we do. We'll have, maybe there's a partner who has a family of channels and they want to drive them all with the same API, and you just pass a different identifier to the API and it returns the data for that particular property. This is a pretty common use case.
Okay. Now on to Paul's question. Can you add some text optimization when packaging channels, like removing spaces?
We don't, but I know that there are developers out there that have written their own sort of almost like BrightScript obfuscation routines that do that.
It's almost like
Well,
a concept of minifying it.
I don't think it will do anything to performance, though.
No.
Hey, does Roku support low latency dash or HLS?
We do have support for low latency HLS. We're in the works of trying to get low latency dash up and running. I'm not sure, this might be a general ask from the audience here as well. If you have any sort of test streams that we could utilize to help build out the low latency support, then that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, please, if you guys want to contribute to the effort for our low latency effort, please just give us your test streams in you can just private message them to us in the Roku developer channel, the Slack channel. You can always or contact your partner manager. But please, your contribution will greatly help out us getting this, efforting this. So definitely give us your test streams. Okay. Brian asks, if you don't call flush on a registry write, will it ever get written, or is a flush always required? What about if the application crashes or the user exits the application?
It might get written, but you should always call flush anyway to guarantee that it'll be written. There's no guarantee if you don't call flush.
Okay. Dash DRM contents are failing in Roku Ultra device, but works fine in other devices. What is the reason for this?
Which DRM are you using?
Yeah, there'd be a good chance, if I can say Raja Guru, if you, there we go. I'm gonna let you speak to it here. Let me, here. Okay, if you can unmute yourself and go ahead. The floor is yours.
Hi, can you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi guys. So we are using a wideband DRM. So when I try to play the content in Roku Ultra device, I'm getting the error like a protected content license error. But if I play the same application in other devices, I'm able to play that content. So I don't know what is the specific reason why it is failing in the specific device.
That's interesting. It definitely shouldn't. That's something we'd like to take a closer look at. If you'd be able to provide us with either a sample app or the DRM details and the test stream, I'd like to take a look at that.
Okay, sure. Already we have reported to the partners, so still I want to know about in this, so I just brought up here.
Yep. Yeah, just provide your stuff, and then the team will take a closer look at it. That'd be great.
Yeah.
George asks, video player squishes when moving off the screen vertically. So imagine scrolling inside a tile. Any advice on how to stop that happening?
Sorry, I'm trying to visualize what's happening.
Squishing. George, this might be a case like if you want to hold on, let me George.
Video would be good.
George,
yeah.
the floor is yours. Describe squishing.
Well, squishing, obviously. So imagine you've got a video player inside a group, and then I start moving it vertically up the screen. So it's inside a node on the screen at position 0, and I start moving it up to position -100, position -200, position -600. As it goes up, the video player squashes down the content. It doesn't maintain the aspect ratio. So, for example, we have video players sometimes in the hero at the top of one of our screens, and as the user scrolls down to the tiles below, the video player fades off nicely, but the contents of the video player squish down, which kind of sometimes looks okay, interesting and arty, but that's not the desired effect.
Fascinating. Do you, I don't know if by chance you tried moving horizontally, do you get similar oddities there?
I don't want to squish horizontally, so I've not tried, but that is an interesting experiment. I should have done it.
It sounds interesting. I'd like to take a look. I'm not sure if you'd be able to provide a sample.
It's just vertical. I think it's just vertical. We did a whole bunch of stuff, so If you've got any ideas how we could prevent it happening.
I
George
can't say
just-
I've heard of this before. It'd be interesting to see though. Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
I would say, George, give us your channel and let the team take a look at it. And that's
Yeah.
that's what it's gonna take.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right. Stephen, last year was mentioned that the black flash when transitioning from the built-in splash screen to a SceneGraph drawn splash would be addressed. A new manifest field was added for this, but the documentation pretty much says not to use it. Any plans to address this further?
It's that RSG optimization manifest entry.
Is that the solution for that black flash transition, right?
That is the reason that I believe was mentioned not to use it if possible was for additional memory consumption. So you sacrifice some memory to get a better visual experience.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's any additional plans to optimize that further though.
So I may have overlooked. So Chris Wyatt Perkins has a question. So let me allow him to. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Could you talk to that a little bit? Are you saying that there's a cost up front or cost for the whole life cycle of the application? And if so, is there a way to see if it's worth us, if our channel basically is slim enough already just to take advantage of it? It's a very common complaint from every designer I've ever worked with.
Interesting. I'm not sure to that level of detail. I'd have to take a look. I'm not sure if anyone else on the panel is intimately aware of this.
Well, to the second part, if you want to try and measure it, you could probably use the profiler or the resource manager.
Oh, all right. Can we please get a dedicated document? Can we get a dedicated document and sample channel for the new pivot node for the video player? It is very difficult to understand how to use this correctly, but it sounds very powerful. I think I can start taking this. Yeah, I can go out, reach out to the developer team on that and ask them for a sample channel. If the team has anything else to add to that, but I certainly will do that. Okay. From a performance point of view, is there any advantage to use SceneGraph? Sorry, is there any advantage to use Scene over Global to store channel data in runtime and still be reachable by all nodes?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
In the ECP ChanPerf output, sorry, in the ECP ChanPerf output, used and resident memory are always the same. What about file memory and swap? How are those different? I think these are defined, by the way. If you look in the Roku Resource Monitor documentation, these should be defined. But certainly, I think one of the panelists, I think Luke, may be able to comment, or Kevin.
So I think that I'm not quite sure what the question means. I'm not completely familiar with how Roku Resource Monitor presents this now, but I think used and resident won't always be the same. Used is going to be the sum of probably the sum of anonymous and swap and file backed, I think.
This might be something to bring up tomorrow on the DevTools panel when Jeff is here.
Yeah, definitely. Please come back. You want more information on those fields, go back, check us out at the Developer Tools panel tomorrow. And also it is defined in the Roku Resource Monitor documentation. Dimas, SceneGraph application uses a lot of texture memory without any art. I think it's about 20-25 megabytes. It's become a problem when developing games. Any plans to optimize this?
So the loaded or the textures command, which was updated in 11.5, might be helpful here because it might display some more information that wasn't previously accessible to you. So that would allow you to see what that 20 to 25 megs is, rather than presumably previously it was transparent to you, had no idea what was taking up that memory.
So just confirming, you're saying use the Roku resource monitor to kind of get that general feedback and then drill down with the profiler?
Right. Use the resource monitor or the R2D2 bitmaps.
Yeah.
And I guess like Saket mentioned earlier, it's an LRU. So if you've referenced any images in the past, they're in there, even if you don't have any references to them. So
yeah. Overall, like having high memory utilization is okay. You want to have stuff in memory rather than just having empty memory with nothing in it. It just becomes a problem when you need more memory than what the system can provide. So if the 20 and 25 megs is in texture memory, but you're not seeing issues, then there likely isn't a problem. As Kevin mentioned, it's going to be evicted through an LRU mechanism.
All right. Is there a way to get a new OS version before release to test channels before users? So actually this one, I'll take this just to say we're always looking for ways to expand our beta program to more and more developers to get their feedback. And I know our new Gene, who kicked off the Dev Summit, is definitely looking to optimize and enhance the beta program to bring on more developers. So yeah, we're working where we want to make that more accessible to more developers to get more feedback to make the releases better. So yes, Paul, we're working on it. Okay. Also, I just want to give everyone a heads up. We're probably going to wrap up in about the next 10 minutes. So we're going to try to, let's see if we can rapid fire these last 10 questions. So George says, we do not love the unused variable messages when sideloading. Please let us switch them off, especially if it lowers compile times.
There's a command in 11.5 to do that.
Yeah, you can do that now.
You can go and use that.
Okay. Can you talk about the sgperf command on port 8080 and where that could be helpful to developers?
Wouldn't you use Roku Resource Monitor now?
Okay. In playing with multiple scenes, scene swapping, it appears once a scene is made, it will never get garbage collected, even if you have no more pointers in your code. It's like the operating system makes a reference to it and will never drop it. Is this intentional?
I don't know if it's intentional, but it's not surprising. And generally, a channel should only have one scene, at least in my opinion.
Is there just a circular loop going on here? Be my guess.
All right. George with the next couple of questions. Is there anything we can do to speed up channel compile time? We do test-driven development and sideloading constantly as we do our red-green coding cycles. A while back, when the unused variable warnings got added, compile times went up by 30%. Any optimizations we can make, or could you guys make?
So compile time, yeah, that's quite a complex question. There's not much you can do. Using a faster device is probably your best bet, to be honest. If that's an option.
Okay.
And I think that 30% increase, we can alleviate that with whatever that pragma command is in 11.5 that removes the warning of unused variables.
Mm-hmm. I think you just answered the question on the next question. What is that command? So
I think it's called BrightScript _warnings.
Something like that.
We can get George. We can look it up and get it to you.
Yeah, we can get it for you.
Okay. I'm not able to create a folder inside the temp folder. So I can delete the folder once instead of delete file by file. So I'm sorry. So can I delete the folder once instead of deleting file by file?
I guess that's a feature request, isn't it?
Can take a note of it. Is there a way? I'm sorry, I was looking towards your next question. Sorry, your smiley face, your emoji got me. Is there a way to get texture RAM freed up? I set URIs to an empty string, and I'm sure they are not used elsewhere, but I don't see texture RAM go back down.
It likely goes back to the LRU mechanism. So the OS will evict those items if they have no reference to it when additional texture memory is needed for a new item.
George, you're a funny, funny man. Next question. We're always working on our, we'll have to see what we're doing for device development. That's definitely out of our bailiwick.
But I would think the latest 4K sticks are pretty quick. So I get
sort of a relative term, I think, as far as faster, relatively quick. A feature request, global time constants other than Booleans, either from the manifest or code. Duly noted.
I'm not sure I fully follow. You can add things to the manifest, which can be interpreted at compile time and runtime. I don't know if that factors in here.
If this is someone, if you want to expand on that, if you want to raise your hand, there we go, Scott. Scott, the floor is yours to expand on.
Remember, these compile time constants can only be Booleans right now in the manifest. We have no other option other than Boolean variables. So it'd be nice if we could do strings or numbers and the entire program see them as if they're a reserved word for that application.
I feel like I've seen non-Boolean variables before, but perhaps I'm thinking of something different.
No, I think Scott is right. There can only be Booleans.
It would just be nice to be able to put anything we want as far as, system-wide variables, where we can change a constant. Like I said, be it a string, be it an integer, be it a Boolean, be it a float. So just a request.
Sure, we were
reasonable.
It's noted. We have added to the list of RFEs from today.
I appreciate it.
All right. Is internal key rotation supported for DRM?
It is supported for Dash with Wi-Fi at the moment.
Okay. Any suggestions for using multiple labels? On some devices, using multiple labels, title, description, multiple options, and so on, causes some artifacts in the text and a really slow navigation.
You might try combining some of them with the multi-style label.
Yep. All right. Is there a way to understand when an app goes to screensaver?
Oh, the ask would be to get like a callback when the screensaver is initiated. Unfortunately not. You get the opposite when the screensaver is dismissed, but yeah, not when it starts.
Okay. Feature request. Can we add the last use time to the bitmap tools? This would give us insight to the LRU caching.
Yeah, I'm not sure what is the use case on this one, because these are already on device side, it's being optimized based on the LRU caching. But we can look at it. Maybe we can just provide the list in the ECP command itself, which is based on the last use, rather than providing the time.
Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to take a question from Chris. Christopher Perkins is going to ask a question. I'm going to take the last 3 questions that are on the screen, and that's going to be it. So let's go, Chris Dwyer Perkins. You are on the air again.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm busy today. So the reason I asked for the least recently used time in the tools is because while device is doing optimizations, it would give developers insight to see all of the textures are in high demand, aka they're all being asked for every single second, which lets us know that we are basically hitting the boundaries of that cache or how close we are getting, right? Right now, we just know that the cache has 20 megabytes of textures, but not when they potentially are going to fall off or what ones would even fall off, right? So all we just see is a big texture load with no information about the underlying cache.
Sure. I think there will be some enhancement for the Roku Resource Monitor tools in 12.0.
Exactly.
We may be able to find more information. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ryan Smith asks, can we play 2 videos at the same time at a channel on a single Roku device? This is sort of a standard developer conference question.
Unfortunately, no. At the moment, we only have one decoder on the platform.
There we go. On the XML nodes, if we define a node in the XML, giving it an ID probably means we're going to use it in the code behind. So why do we need the m.top.find node step? Couldn't this be assumed in automatic?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm not sure. Also, don't know if it's a good idea to assume anything rather than being explicit, but.
All right. Let me, we're going to move on to the last quick. Chris, I see your hand, but we gotta wrap this up.
I'll lower it. Sorry.
That's okay. All right, Brian. Last question goes to you. So does the multi-style label use less resources than using multiple labels?
I don't know for sure, but I would say potentially. I mean, the actual glyphs being rendered on the screen are the same, but the fact that it's a single label versus multiple labels would probably save you something.
You could test it in the Roku Resource Monitor.
True.
All right. So that concludes this was a lightning round of SceneGraph questions. By the way, congratulations to all the attendees and our panelists, because I'm pretty sure if I went back and I looked how many questions we just went through, we must have gone through about over 50. So congrats, that was incredible. And I really appreciate the level of participation on both sides. Makes for a fun panel.